So we're now live on
Excellent.
YouTube.
Well, welcome everybody.
Very exciting for our first Juice live edition. So if you've not come across this before, I'm Amanda Cookson.
And I'm Simon Cookson, and this is. Shall we put a health warning before we get going that this is our first one of these, and it is a little bit of an experiment. So do bear with us if we don't know what we're doing.
I'm sure it'll be brilliant. Well, what I was going to say was the Juice is our fortnightly newsletter, and we share a little nugget of something really helpful that's going to help you work effectively with others at work. It's full of practical things. And what we thought we'd do is we would do a live version where we go into a bit more detail about one of the tools or things that we share, and the whole kind of purpose and ethos around what we're doing is to help you as a technical specialist be as confident with people as you are in your technical specialism. And it really is a reflection on our own journey where we both know I'm an utter nerd and I absolutely love detail, and I was responsible for customer experience. So ask me anything about net promoter scores and customer journey mapping and all those sorts of things, and that was my jam. And then give me someone tricky to handle. It was really difficult for me and just wasn't where my natural skill set lies. And we work a lot with technical specialists because quite often you get promoted because of the strength of your specialism, and then as you get into those senior positions you have to deliver everything through people, and that's where it gets really hard. And it doesn't get harder than when people are under challenge, under pressure, under stress, and their behavior starts to go weird. So that's really what today is all about.
Yeah, I think that idea of managing, handling, navigating really behavior in other people that you find really difficult is probably, it's definitely top three, arguably number one of those issues that leaders and managers talk to us about. Over the years of doing this, we've been running Northern Value Creators now for 9 years, and if there is an issue that people constantly talk about, it is how to work better, particularly if you're a line manager, how to work better with people that are behaving in a way that is really challenging.
So shall we share some juice then? Shall we share some stuff that's super useful? So
Hmm.
I'm going to share a personal story. And when I was first promoted into senior leadership, I was very comfortable shaping the strategy and the approach and what we were going to do with the team. So doing that kind of workshopping, pulling together ideas. And as soon as I was put in the boardroom and I was being asked really kind of deliberately difficult questions, and I think there were a couple of people who were senior leaders that I worked with that were, I think, quite spiky and would be asking a question to try and find a fault rather than asking a question to expand thinking. And I found that my mind would go absolutely blank, and I would struggle to be articulate. I'd struggle to explain what I meant, and stuff that sounded brilliant outside of the room when I was in the room just started to fall apart. So I was sent on a 5-day conflict management training program. I remember because I had to go up to Leeds and it was in a really crappy room. And I don't remember very much about the training at all, or the outcome from it. All that really stuck in my mind was that when I was in, a calm, non-conflict state, I was able to use all the 4 different colors of a personality. But once I was in conflict mode, or when I was kind of feeling really stressed by other people's behaviors, my behavior would then flip into the blue zone, and I'd get very activated by anything that seemed unfair. And so the training, I think, wasn't helpful for me because it didn't give me tools that I could use. Whereas when I started to understand about the brain and what happens to the brain, I now have a real understanding about, it's not that I'm rubbish at conflict. It's not that I wasn't good in a boardroom setting. It was that my brain was being flipped, and it was the impact of cortisol. So we're going to step you through exactly what happens to your brain, why it happens, and give you a tool that you can do to step that down. But also, we're going to talk today about the survival strategies, which are the things that come out when you are in that sort of conflict mode. But before we do, Simon, I want to hear from you. What do you do when you're stressed? You know, how does your personality or approach or the things you do change when that challenge is kind of elevated?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things, and I think I'll go through it in a second or two. But I think I just wanted to pick up on something that you said, and it was the word that you used a few times, which is tools. And I think that's what I'd like people, whenever they're watching this today, watching this in the future, reading some of our materials, and it all comes from everything that we put out about challenging behavior and about how to understand challenging behavior is all coming from that place of wanting to help and give you something that is super practical. Because people, particularly people in line management positions, leadership responsibility, you don't just have to kind of put up with bad behavior. You are responsible as a line manager for resolving difficult situations and resolving and changing people's behavior and moving them away from the challenging and difficult behavior that they're displaying because it's causing problems. So we want to help. We were that's where we're coming from. So it's not about excusing behavior or just understanding it for an academic from an academic standpoint. It's providing you with those tools to actually change people's behavior to stop this challenging behavior happening. So I'd like everyone just to kind of, if you're going through our stuff, is to have that in mind. I think that's that you'll understand kind of where we're coming from. So about the question about what I do, there's various things and various strategies, and I know we're going to talk about survival strategies, but there are various strategies that I have learned to follow when things get stressful and when things get tough. And I think my go-to is probably what we call praise and approval. So I think one of the things that I've learned that I've found most challenging is that kind of fear of judgment and fear of getting things wrong. So I'm very much in that kind of praise and approval and looking for praise and approval. And if I feel that I'm not getting approval, I'm not getting praise, I probably jump to lots of kind of catastrophic conclusions about how awful it is. The work that I've done must be really awful if they've not said it's great. It might be great, but I just assume because I've not heard anything, I've not had that validation externally that I must be doing something wrong.
Brilliant. I'm going to share a slide. So one of my favorite models for helping people understand the brain is something that was created by Dan Siegel. He's a neuroscientist, and he suggests that you can use your hand as a bit of a model of the brain. So when we are in a calm whole brain state, we're able to do our best thinking. Our brain is kind of constructed in the way that we've got our limbic system, which is full of our emotions and memories in the middle. We've got our amygdala, which is our warning system for when we're under threat. We've got our cortex, which helps us have self-regulation and self-control. And our fingernails kind of represent where our prefrontal cortex is, which is this front part of the brain, and where we're able to do our kind of socially acceptable behavior, our planning and our creative thinking. So when we are in a calm state, we are able to access all parts of our brain, and we can come up with great ideas, and we can be connected and cooperative and work really well together with others. What happens is when we are under pressure or under threat, our amygdala, which is our warning system, will then give an alert. And when it is alerted, it will start to introduce a neurochemical called cortisol into the brain. And what cortisol does is it shuts off access to our prefrontal cortex. So the reason why, from a survival perspective, we do this is if you imagine that a lion has walked into the room, you do not want to be looking creatively at that lion and thinking, well, I always thought they were a bit of a brighter yellow. This one's more of like a dirty, like sandy brown color. And I wonder if this is the lion that ate Bob, or if it's a completely different lion. And if you're having all of these sorts of thoughts, you are not focused in on what you need to do to survive, which is probably to leg it or hide or whatever. I'm not very good with what to do with lions, but our brain anyway stops us from having all of these really creative kind of wondrous wandering thoughts, and instead makes us hyper focused. And in this hyper focused state, and let's just be clear that the lion at work could be your boss saying, I'd like to see that report, please. It could be a colleague making a snidey remark on Slack. It could be anything that creates that kind of sense in our chest or our gut that just makes us not feel particularly great or a bit irked or a bit agitated. So once we've got that cortisol in our brain, we become more reactive. We're more suspicious of others. That negativity bias where we don't really trust people and everything's just a bit shit, isn't it, really? That starts to be elevated. We also, and I think this is like the ouchie, you drop 13 IQ points and you are 50% less creative. So in this state, you've become less intelligent, less able to come up with problems, more likely to make errors because you have these kind of perceptual narrowing, so you just can't see the things in front of you. So when you're in this state, you start to behave in these kind of automatic patterns, because in a sense, the bit of self-regulation, self-control is gone because that's flipped away. And this kind of creative choice in terms of how we behave has also gone because that part of the brain has flipped away. So we're on our habitual automatic behaviors. And it's this bit where the survival strategies come in. And it's this bit that for me was like the missing piece in the puzzle about why did I behave in one way when I was outside the boardroom and in another way when I was in front of the boardroom or with particular directors. And it would be because, one, I was flipped, and two, my habitual behaviors and my survival strategies were very different to the types of behaviors that I would exhibit when I was in that whole brain state. So there are 5 of these survival strategies, and we're going to sort of step people through them. But I wonder, Simon, if there's anything you want to add before I kind of launch into explaining the survival strategies and then what we can do with them.
I think the only thing I would add is that what Amanda's been describing there, so this process that's going on in our brain. So our brain detects a threat, that strange look our boss gives you, whatever it might be, those words that you've received as being unkind, whatever it might be that you might come across at work. Once our brain perceives that that's a threat, a chemical chain reaction is kicked off in our brain. And this is happening to all of us all of the time. It's not something that, it happens to a certain type of person and not a certain type of person. It doesn't happen, it doesn't make a distinction between male, female, black, white. It's going on inside all of us. And being able to recognize it and being able to counter its effects and be aware of it and use strategies to get back into that kind of creative collaborative space is really important. So it's nothing that we need to feel ashamed of. It's just who we are. And it's a chemical reaction that we detect a threat. So when we detect a threat, our brain pushes us away from those creative, open, collaborative ways of thinking, and it pushes us towards those kind of fixed, protective, suspicious, egocentric kind of behaviors. And that's a really fundamental thing, and that's where these survival strategies come from, because these are the very behaviors that our brain is pushing us toward when we feel threatened.
Yeah. And yeah, thanks for that. And also, I think I would say to my coaching clients is about flipping your lid. So as the cortisol comes into the brain, your ability to then have that kind of whole brain thinking, access your prefrontal cortex, self-regulation disappears, but you can flip your lid within 0.007 seconds. So it's faster than conscious thought. And that's how quickly the amygdala reacts to danger. And it needs to do that. If you think about those stories where people have leapt out the way from a speeding car towards them and done these things that seem superhuman, it's because our brain has got this ability to react super fast before conscious thought. But when it comes to maybe a social threat or something that someone's done at work that's hurtful, our brains reacted to it before we've consciously caught up and thought, oh my days, I can't believe they've just said that, or they've just done that, or I wonder what their intention is. So it's really swift. And what can happen is that you get flipped into your protection behaviors, and the person that did the thing also gets flipped into their protection behaviors, because you're both then behaving in a way that creates things. So it can create a bit of a negative spiral where nobody really intended harm or hurt, but everybody is in this state where they're kind of really flipped and really agitated.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we've often talked, haven't we, over the years about this flipping your lid. It's not a new model, and about what you can't do when you're in this state. But what we've never really clearly, I think, explained to people is, okay, well, if I'm not doing this, if I've dropped these IQ points, and if I'm not creative, what am I doing? And it's the what am I doing that are these survival strategies. And I just think they are so useful and so interesting in terms of understanding, why do people, sometimes behave in such a weird way, why are they doing that? Because sometimes I think the way people behave when they are challenged is so kind of dumb. It's really counterintuitive, it's really unhelpful, it makes things worse, not better. So why are they doing it? And it's because we're in this flip state. It's automatic, we don't have much control over our behavior, and we learn these strategies from the way that our family behaved and what we learned kind of growing up. So it isn't that our brain is thinking, okay, so the best thing to do in this situation is to do X. This is the exact opposite. This is our brain just going, what do I do? And just reverting back to the things that you either observed your parents doing or just learned to do as a kid. So there are 5 survival strategies. And should we just kind of go through each one in turn, do you think, Simon?
Yeah, I think that'd be worthwhile. I do think it's also worth pointing out that when we think about things like this, so let's take this first strategy there of power, because this is quite a difficult one. A lot of the behaviors that we find most difficult at work. And if we just look at the list there, I'm not going to read them all out. Everyone can see them, but things like finger pointing, gossiping, being combative, dominating discussions, essentially being quite domineering. Potentially, you would even call this bullying behavior. Some of this is the most challenging stuff that you're going to come across, or the most obviously challenging stuff that you're going to come across when you're trying to manage and deliver through other people. So I think this is a really good one to remember, that these survival strategies are not who these people are all of the time. They're not a personality type. So you can't say that this person is a power person, or this person is, unhelpful and uses snide remarks and is abrasive all of the time. Sometimes it might feel like that because our brains often only really remember extremes of behavior rather than, the average behavior. But this and the rest of the strategies are the same, are not who these people are at all the time. Okay.
And
They are just how they're responding to feelings of the need to protect themselves.
and I think it's worthwhile thinking then about it's their response to a situation, and
Mm,
that situation could be a person, but the person that they're responding to, it's not about them in terms of their being. It would be more about their role. It might be about hierarchy. It might be about restriction and control. It will be something either within the environment, the situation, the person, or the power dynamic that is making them feel powerless. And in order to feel comfortable, this is the behavior that's coming out.
mm,
So quite often I find when I'm coaching executives is that they will have people that they work with that behave really nicely, but who behave really badly in other situations. And it's like, well, why can't they behave like this over there? Why do I get this behavior from this person? But when they're working with someone else, they get a completely different set of behavior. And it will be because of what's being triggered within them within that dynamic.
So somebody that uses power, sorry, just to kind of finish off on that one before we move forward. People that use power tend to really struggle with feeling weak or powerless. And they'll do whatever they can to avoid the feelings that make them feel bad. They also get triggered when they sense that they're unimportant or they're being left out. So anything that makes somebody feel weak or powerless, if they use this strategy, that will trigger them.
Yeah, I just thought, well, I'll find that slide, yeah, because I think this is the interesting thing, and I often think that I need to find a better way of putting it than shit wheels, because shit's a bit rude. But somebody called it the other day a cry wheel, which is interesting. So the opposite of like a positive flywheel. So often we end up as human beings doing behavior because we feel uncomfortable, because we don't feel safe, because we're being kind of activated or triggered. But the behavior that we do creates a reaction to us that gives us more of what we're uncomfortable with. So we end up doing more of our behavior. So I think what's really fascinating with the whole thing around people exhibiting those power dynamics is they hate feeling weak or powerless. So they dial up this kind of bravado and being brusque and being difficult. And quite often what that can activate in others is that, no, I'm not having that behavior, or people, blank facing them or ignoring them because they find them so uncomfortable. So then their behavior, their survival behavior, gives them more of what they don't want, and they get more of the bad behavior. So they end up kind of, thumping their fists and harumphing and all the rest of it.
Well,
So
yeah, because that's really interesting, isn't it? Because that then leads us into thinking about, if somebody is reacting to feeling weak or powerless and feeling threatened by that, by amping up their power and, sometimes physically, building themselves up, that will then trigger other people, say if you're in a meeting. And then if you've got somebody else that is also a power strategy user, you have that clash. And then that's what you often find, that people label their personality clashes in the team. It's nothing to do with personality at all. It's to do with both of these individuals feel threatened, and that has triggered and pushed them into that protection mode. And they're both using a similar strategy, which causes greater conflict.
Yeah.
So it's not that they've got some sort of irreconcilable personality clash, that the only way that you can resolve it is by separating them and moving into different teams. It's actually by sorting out the need about why they're feeling threatened in the first place.
Yeah. And I feel like the solution to this particular behavior is a bit like a jujitsu move. You're taking the energy and you're kind of moving with it. So actually, when someone's exhibiting that power, it's about giving them more choices, more freedom, more control, because
I,
underneath the
that's
behavior,
yeah, that's a brilliant point about that using energy.
yeah,
I think that's really important because eh, power is a high energy behavior. So if you can repurpose that energy and push it in a positive direction, these people can be very authoritative, very dynamic, very engaging. Yeah, but it's only when it gets out of hand and gets
mm,
overdone that it causes.
overdone, when it turns into not listening,
Yeah,
talking over, um, not involving everybody. And so when you've got somebody behaving like that, it's almost like the last thing you're going to do is think, I'm going to give you more choice,
yes,
more freedom, more control. One of the things I was taught years ago was give somebody who's behaving like this in a meeting, give them the pen.
mm,
So, and I guess in a virtual meeting, I guess that would be, the online whiteboard. But it's that a bit of control, a bit of power, a bit of
mm,
status. So
mm.
they're then the one holding the pen, and everyone's looking at them for writing stuff down on the flip. So it's just little things that I think can help to give them a little bit more control over what they're doing and how they do it. So I'm going to go
Yeah,
back.
let's move on.
Um, So the next one is drama, and drama is my survival strategy. So when things get uncomfortable for me, I tend to get louder, a bit more flappy, make a fuss, go into very long tales with voices, worry, um, and I think for me, it's a way of trying to express, this is how I'm feeling, this is what's going on for me. I really need you to notice, to pay attention, to give me reassurance. But I think, and I've learned to kind of dial it down, because this again is another high energy thing. But quite often when I'm over the top and a bit too much, people are like, is there an off button, or can I dial it down a little bit, please? And that's the exact opposite to do for someone who's struggling with drama. I don't know, Simon, it's my long suffering husband, whether you want to share what this looks like for you when I'm sort of in full on drama mode.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one for me is the catastrophizing part of it, part of drama. Something will have gone wrong, and then what you can often do, and I think it's a fairly common thing, is that kind of problem stacking.
Mm.
So let's think of an example. Let's think of something silly. You've dropped a glass in the kitchen and it's smashed all over the floor. So, oh my God, it's a great disaster. And then you bring in something else that had happened that had gone wrong, and then stack that onto this problem, and then something else, or something else, or something else. And
And
all,
dinner's going to be ruined and everyone hates me.
yeah, suddenly the world is on fire.
Yeah.
Because you've gone into this kind of catastrophe spiral. And if you can think about work, there'll be people that you've worked with that do this. Something's gone wrong, something has broken, something hasn't gone to plan, and then it's, oh my God, then this, then this, then this, and then suddenly the world is a massive problem. And it's not that the person that is using drama is not doing it to be dramatic. They're not doing it to, they're not negative. They're not catastrophizing because they only see the negative, or that's all that all that they're focused on. They're doing it for attention.
Mm.
That's the key word with drama. It's about attention. This person has been triggered. So if we go back to that handy model bin, they're in that flipped state, so their brain is pushing them towards these instinctive protection strategies, and what's pushing them into these protection strategies is this idea of, oh my god, I've not been heard, I feel left out, I've been ignored, nobody's noticed, no one's hearing what I'm saying. I may have raised a point in a meeting or a document that doesn't seem to deserve, got the attention or the interest it deserves. So I'm going to ramp up my behavior in order to get the thing or myself to be noticed. And this is a really tricky one, I think, because and I guess I'm saying this because drama is very much not me. Of all the strategies, this is the one I use the least, if ever at all, actually. So my reaction to drama is to downplay,
Mhm.
is to minimize, is to downplay, essentially to get the person to be quiet,
Well, I
stop.
think you want to fix it, don't you? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it'll be all right. So you're trying to fix it, and I don't want you to fix it. I
It's
want
not
you to
about fixing,
acknowledge
is
my
it?
feelings.
It's attention, not
Yeah,
solution. There's
exactly.
nothing to be fixed other than you want to be heard. I think
Yeah.
that's maybe a nice way to think about it. And we often minimize people that are being dramatic. We minimize them, so we take the stage away, we cut them short, we cut the meeting short. We maybe don't invite them to certain meetings. If there's something that is quite sensitive or possibly quite a complex, challenging topic, you maybe don't invite them at all because, oh my God, I don't want them there, because they're just going to blow everything out of proportion. They're going to cause a great big scene, and it's just going to make things harder. So I think a lot of managers deal or attempt to deal with drama through fixing and minimizing,
Yeah. Which
which
will wind it up and create
yeah,
that cry wheel again. And I think there was
which is not getting the person noticed, which is all they want.
there was a technique we learned when we've got 2 adopted children, and our youngest had some quite challenging behaviours, and we had some therapeutic parenting training, and we learned a technique from non-violent communication, which is basically that when so Tom used to just like yell and scream, and basically we were trained to go, I hear you screaming, I hear you. And then whatever he said, whether it was, I don't know, I want juice, I want a toy, I don't want to take
Get
my
my
shoes off,
socks.
to then repeat back what he said. And again, it's giving me trauma just thinking about it. But going back to adults, if people are like, what's that got to do with working with my drama person in the office? Actually, if you say, I hear you, what you're telling me is you're feeling X, you're worried about Y, then the person who's expressing their feelings and wants to be heard and wants to know that they matter can hear from you that you've heard them. And often that is enough. That's all you need. So you don't need the long story. You don't need the long dramas and explanations. You just need to say, so what I'm hearing you say is, and then repeat back their words, because what that will do is it will signal, I've heard you. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one, which is yours, praise and approval. So, and interestingly for us in terms of our dynamic, this is the thing I do least. And actually I need to remind myself that other people have a need for praise and approval, because it's not something that is kind of in my automatic behavior. So Simon, as this is you, do you want to tell us all about your need for praise and approval?
Yes, yeah. So this is the strategy. This is my kind of learned go-to strategy. That if I can, don't want to turn this into some sort of deep and meaningful therapy session, but I can trace the roots of this is my kind of most dominant strategy all the way back to being, you know, probably 2 or 3 years old. I can certainly, you know, that the word that jumps out at me there is that clingy behavior. And that was definitely, that's what everybody would describe me as a child. You know, I can remember, I have very vivid memories of me in first year at school, so like 5 years old probably, of being literally dragged all the way to school screaming my head off, because you know, I didn't want to go, I didn't want to leave home, I didn't want to go to school. So that's a good illustration of the fact that these are really deep-seated behaviors that we've learned, and because they've been part of our response mechanism for so many years, they're just habits, and they're habitual instinctive behaviors. So remember back to what Amanda said about how quick the brain reacts, that 0.007 seconds. It can only respond that quickly because it is using established patterns and established habits. So I have learnt, you know, these behaviors that we've got on here, and I use them that quickly because I don't think about using them. I don't go, I wonder what the most rational strategy in this situation is going to be. Ah, right, I will do that. That's what I do when I'm not flipped, because I've got access to my prefrontal cortex, the PFC, so they're the little bits of the brain, and I can use that to rationally weigh up what course of action I should take. When I'm flipped, I'm not in that state. I act, I respond, I react. And that's why you use those long established habits, because that's what the brain can access very, very quickly. So I think this one, particularly in an office, you know, work setting, some of the probably most commonplace praise and approval activities that you're going to see is the sensitivity to feedback. So if you've got someone in your team that you dread giving feedback to because you know they'll get upset, take it really personally, they'll react to it quite strongly, no matter how hard you try to frame it, then they're probably using the praise and approval strategy. The other one that's quite common at work is the kind of white lies. So have you done that piece of work yet? Oh God, yeah, it's going fine. Absolutely, almost done. I'll get it to you tomorrow. Where in my head, I'm kind of thinking, shit, I haven't even started it yet.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to say it because I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be met with feelings of disapproval or rejection. So I'm going to say, God, yeah, all on track, it's all fine. But it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in terms of helping with people who are using this particular survival strategy, it is about acknowledging their efforts and what they have done and achieved and their contribution. And it is also making it really clear that whatever feedback or negative or developmental point you're giving is to help them be even better. So you're building on a foundation that is good and solid, rather than it's, you know, it's just all rubbish. So I think that's really key. And I think you know, if this isn't your strategy, like me, I need to remember how important it is to say thank you, to acknowledge the work. And quite often, because I'm kind of racing ahead, and also with drama, you know, my brain might go, oh my gosh, there's this to do and this to do, which to someone with praise and approval just sounds like all of this good stuff I'm ignoring and I'm just pointing out the problems. So it's really interesting how the dynamic of these two are like almost pulling apart and can create a bit of a clash, because in praise and approval, you're minimizing what's there, you're minimizing problems. In drama, you want them to be acknowledged. In drama, you're pointing out all the issues. And praise and approval, that just sounds like you're telling me everything I've done is shit.
Yes. So when you wake up in the morning, and sometimes I mean this quite literally, the first thing that comes out of your mouth is a to-do list.
Yeah.
Is yes, that's difficult for a minimizing praise and approval person to deal with. And it's like, okay.
It's amazing we've done so well together for so long, isn't it? All right then, so let's take a look at safety. So this is one of my survival strategies. So I'm not, if I'm not in drama with my flappy chicken wings, then I've retreated with my tin hat on in my panic cave, and I'm just in full on kind of anxious, and I can get incredibly pedantic about rules and process. And this particular survival strategy is really about controlling the environment. So it's making sure that there's a plan and it's going to happen as we expect. And for somebody with safety as a survival strategy, surprises are not great. We don't like surprises. We like to know what's happening. And anything out of the blue, or anything sort of like, you know, if you can imagine me at work. So if I had a Cookson come and see me, I'd be instantly into safety. What have I done? What's the problem? Drama, panic. So oh dear. So yeah, so that is safety. What's your observation, Simon, of safety?
I think safety is an interesting one, because, and I think it's probably one of the best to illustrate that these survival strategies, all of them, you can't see them as which one's the best, which one's the worst. You know, none of them are good or bad. And I think safety is a good illustration of that, because someone who uses safety in high pressure, challenging situations will be really good at putting a plan together. You know, so you want your delivery manager, your project manager to use safety strategies, because you want somebody in that kind of delivery manager role to be really well organized and to have processes, and for those processes to be really robust. So this is a good one to illustrate that when these are used appropriately and not allowed to get out of hand. So when there is a not overwhelming amount of pressure and stress in a situation, somebody that uses safety, as I say, will be a brilliant organizer, a brilliant planner, and a brilliant organizer. And it is only when that pressure and stress gets too much and their strategies start to dial their strategies up to 11, that you start to get those kind of controlling and micromanaging and that rigidity of thinking, because they're not good kind of out the box thinkers, or being able to respond very, very quickly to changing circumstances. That'll be very triggering for them, because
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that out of the box thinking, I am very good at out of the box thinking when I'm in a whole brain state.
When you're not flipped. Yeah.
When I'm flipped, no, absolutely not. That bit of my brain just disappears, you know. And again, I think that's super helpful, thinking back to, you know, some of these big kind of strategic projects, strategic plans, transformations that I was working on. You know, when I was teasing it through the team, working through with other departments, other stakeholders, absolutely brilliant. Certain number of directors, and then it was like gone.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is another one where the energy of what has triggered it is what you use to help resolve it. So this giving more certainty and control, quite often at work, things are incredibly uncertain, incredibly volatile, but it's about giving kind of boundaries, frameworks, tolerances. So I used to work really brilliantly with tolerances, where I'd know, you know, it could go wrong this much and that would be absolutely fine. But anything out of that, then I needed to kind of start fire drilling, you know, what was I going to do and to resolve that. So it helped me with my flexibility and when to know when it was too much and too uncomfortable, or when, you know, I'd be in trouble. So I think that's a really good way of thinking about this, is what sort of frameworks, boundaries, tolerances can you give?
Yeah. These people are the ones that you want to manage your risk log.
Oh, my risk logs were always beautiful.
Plan and deliver your, as you mentioned, the fire drills and contingency processes and that sort of thing, because that will give them a lot of sense of safety.
Yeah. All right then. So this is the final one of the 5 survival strategies. So Simon, would you say you do a bit of distraction?
Yeah. It's definitely my kind of second tier,
Right.
if you like, sort of strategy. As I say, I think praise and approval is number 1. Distraction is definitely number 2. And then I think I've got a little bit of power coming in at number 3 if, everything else has failed miserably.
I'm going to challenge you there a little bit just to get a bit. I think that actually what you use depends on the circumstance. Because I was going to say distraction is like my third, but sometimes it's my first. And safety is sometimes the key. I think our brain is super, super clever, super complex. And when we're in survival mode, it just picks. It does pick, right, for this, I'm going to do this. For this, I'm going to do that. For this,
I was going to say,
do that.
does it pattern match then?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of, I try. There'll be a situation. I can't think of an example off the top of my head where right. Okay, this is in that 0.007th of a second, brain is going right. I recognize this situation, this threat as type A. So therefore, my go-to strategy is going to be distraction.
Yeah, because power is generally about controlling people. Safety is about controlling the environment. Drama is about getting that kind of recognition and acknowledgement, as is praise and approval, but you're going about it in different ways. And distraction is all about numbing. So I think it's when all the other things don't work and I've got nothing else available to me, then I'm going to go into distraction mode. And this is that mind like a squirrel, off, not listening, and doing all sorts of things except the thing that you're supposed to. Let me see if I can find the slide for what to do and stick that up.
It's about overwhelm, isn't it? With just when someone is using distraction, it's probably that they're feeling overwhelmed. So that might show it, distraction. How might that show itself at work? It might be that they're too busy. You need them to do a certain thing, or you need them to attend a certain meeting, whatever it might be, but they're too busy. They feel like they're too busy to do it. They'll probably argue with you, that they don't need to attend and they can't possibly do that because they've got so much other things on. But when you actually look and analyze at the other stuff that they're doing, it's nowhere near as important as the things that you need them to do.
I think distraction is also when people have back-to-back meetings and that busyness, rather than giving themselves time to think. I was at a conference yesterday and one of the speakers said the best gift you can give yourself is time in your diary for reflection. And if you give yourself that space, that stillness, it will radically improve your outputs, the quality of your thinking and your impact. But in order to have that stillness, you need to feel all the feelings and think all the thoughts. And actually, when stuff is really uncomfortable and really hard, we often then go into that running mode where, we're either back-to-back meetings, really, really busy. I haven't got time. Or we're also kind of filling our time with, I don't know, it could be box sets, binge eating, pub, whatever it is that you do that means that you're not paying attention to your kind of inner world, your inner thoughts, your inner feelings. And I think what is helpful for somebody, if you're managing someone where you can say, do you know what, I think this is overwhelm, I think this is distraction. It's not helpful to tell them that. What is helpful, though, is to give them what's my first step? what's my next step? And just to break it down, one thing. So rather than saying everything in its entirety, just pick the one thing that you're going to do, because that narrowing down helps to improve focus, and it helps to make it more manageable and much easier to sort of deal with.
I wonder whether distractions at the heart of that common challenge that managers often talk to us about, which is, I've asked somebody on my team to do something, but they just don't seem to do it. I've asked it time and time again. They kind of say yes. They understand. Yeah, they're going to do it, but they never do it. They often do something different, or they do. They do it in a completely different way. That's not what was needed. And I wonder where. And that often people, when they're talking to us, they talk about how confusing that is. So I've told them, 100 times that this needs to happen and they still don't do it. What do I do? You feel like you're on a bit of a dead end. Is that distraction?
It could be, but I think the thing is that the survival strategies are what's going on behind the scenes in someone's brain that's then affecting their behavior. So it could be praise and approval, because the thing that you've asked them to do, I know if I do it, I'm not going to do it well. Therefore, I don't want to do it. It could be safety, that the thing you're asking me to do is outside of my control. It isn't safe. I don't think that that's going to help. It's going to make the environment more risky. Therefore, I don't want to do it, and I don't feel able to express myself. So I think my key advice is, when you've got people who aren't doing what you think you've asked them to do, it's actually checking in. What can you let's just establish clarity together. Yeah, what have you heard me say, or can you repeat back how you're going to approach this?
I think that's a great kind of segue into maybe what our closing kind of point around this is, which is, with these 5 strategies, it's the most important thing is not to try and label somebody or produce a watertight diagnosis of what you're seeing in front of you. I think the most important takeaway I would encourage people to think about with these strategies is that open, curious state that you should be staying in, to try and think, oh, I wonder what's going on here. What am I seeing? What behavior am I seeing from this person? What strategies, and it probably will be more than one, maybe multiple strategies in the same conversation. What am I seeing? What strategies am I seeing? And therefore, what could I try in terms of how I respond and deal with this person going forward, to try and minimize the obvious threat that they feel?
And I would add into that, I would say yes, and think about that handy model of the brain. And so if somebody is behaving in a way that is making you flip your lid, and they are pissing you off, annoying you, agitating you, in this state, you can't be curious. So it's about then being able to say to yourself, do you know what? I can see that Simon is behaving in a way that I find challenging, but it's okay, because he's probably in survival mode. There's probably a lot going on for him. And I just need to be a bit more curious, ask some questions, and understand what's going on. And if I can understand what's going on for him, then I can help. And as you're doing that, you're kind of working with your brain, because what your amygdala does is it says, something's happened. How do we feel about it? And your brain goes, we don't like it. What do we do when this happens? Right. Well, we go into this, survival mode. So if you can talk yourself down and say to your brain, do you know what? This is okay. I know what's going on. Yeah, Simon's in survival mode, and I've got some strategies and things I can try. You can bring yourself back into your whole brain state. And in this state, it's really easy to then ask and say, hey, Simon, what's going on? What do you need? How can I help you? What's our next step together? Brilliant. So that's our first live. I can't believe we've talked for 54 minutes. We weren't really sure. You can. We talk a lot, don't we? But hopefully there's been stuff that's useful. We've got a whole guide that covers everything that we talked about today, and we are going to make these I want to make this a Friday thing, so every Friday we go live. Although of course when you look at the diary it's like, but not this week, but hopefully it will become like a regular little feature, so we can stream into our channel. All right, then. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you've got some value from this, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.